Hi guys, it's Euclid. Before I begin, I know I said I'd include Las Plagas in a trope exploration video, but I felt a rush of inspiration to finish this one, instead of work on that one. After all, each monster has their own extensive lore that I could make into individual videos instead of just an overarching one on the trope of an organism that spreads fast and kills, or controls, whatever it comes into contact with. It did take me a long time to finish this video, since I had a lot of real life stuff I had to take care of, but here we are. I'm not usually one to beg and scrape for likes and subscriptions, but I'd love it if you could. Now that that shameless piece of e-begging is out of the way, here we go. Resident Evil 4 is a survival horror / action game that is part of the long-running Resident Evil franchise. 4 in particular is the dearest to me, seeing as it was the first one I ever played. I remember putting countless hours into Leon's Spanish adventure, and it's up there in my top 5 games I've ever played. Well, was. See, a while back it was announced that Resident Evil 4 was getting a remake, like RE2 and 3. I loved the remake of 2, but I wasn't as fond of the remake of the third game. Well, I'll admit, 3 has grown on me. So, when the Resident Evil 4 remake was announced, I was a little skeptical with how it would be. Resident Evil 4 was already, for me, one of the greatest hits in gaming of all time. If Capcom had a team that did not understand the source material, or the series itself, it very well could have flopped. Surpassing what could be described as a seemingly perfect game would most definitely be a daunting and possibly impossible task. And yet the team over at Capcom were not only able to make a successful remake, but in my mind, make a superior version of Resident Evil 4. Now, enough of my gushing. I made this video to explain the driving antagonistic force in both iterations of this game, an ancient parasite referred to as Las Plagas. Obviously, spoilers ahead for Resident Evil 4 and its remake, and I won't be going over the major bosses in this game, as they deserve videos in of themselves. I'll be excluding Chief Mendez, Ramon Salazar, Jack Krauser, and Osmond Sadler. Our story begins in Valdelobos, meaning Valley of Wolves. Valdelobos is a remote and mountainous region of Spain. While Valdelobos most certainly is located in Spain, it's almost as if the area is disconnected from Spain and the modern world itself. In ancient times, the area was said to have been home to an advanced pre-Roman city-state. No one quite knows how Las Plagas entered the region, or where exactly it came from, but old murals in an ancient underground city in West Africa indicate that they were present in that region. Anyway, back to Valdelobos. In times long past, the first Castellan of Salazar Castle would lead a crusade against a cult that worshipped Las Plagas, known as Los Iluminados, or in English, the Enlightened Ones. The Castellan would seal Las Plagas in an underground vault for many years, and the parasites within would seemingly die off from not having food or hosts. A bioweapons researcher and leader of a reformed Los Iluminados, Osmond Sadler, would set his sights on the 8th Castellan of the Salazar family. After persuading and corrupting the young Castellan, the two would release the parasite into a nearby village. Los Iluminados would come back stronger than ever, and in Sadler's quest to achieve world domination through use of the Plaga parasite, he would target the daughter of the President of the United States. Once she's kidnapped by Sadler's special agent, Jack Krauser, she would be infected and she could easily infect her father. Once he's under the control of Sadler and Las Plagas, the entire world would follow. Leon Scott Kennedy, one of the few survivors of the Raccoon City incident, turned US special agent, would be sent to Spain to recover the president's daughter, Ashley Graham. After surviving the endless hordes of bloodthirsty villagers, regenerating horrors, and armored clawed abominations, Leon and Ashley would escape alive, and Sadler and his minions would no longer be a threat to mankind. Now, what are these creatures known as Las Plagas? Well, Las Plagas appears to be an arthropod parasite that completely dominates the mind of its victim. It latches onto the central nervous system of its host, eliminating all free will and greatly increasing aggression. Before you lose your free will and become a minion of a more dominant species of Plaga...
Looks like the right place. You okay?
I think so. Instead of worrying about her, worry about your own skin. Foolish little lamb. Temperance, child.
Ashley.
You'll experience internal hemorrhaging, coughing up blood, and the veins in your eyes and body will become more pronounced. Fainting and auditory and visual hallucinations are also signs of Plaga infection. However, you can stunt the plaga's growth before it matures, using a special medicine or even removing it, using a special radiological machine. Once a plaga is mature enough, it will completely dominate its host's mind, causing the person to become what could be described in Spanish as a ganado, or livestock in English. These ganados are not like your typical zombies. They can run, use tools, vocalize, and even use rudimentary strategies and planning. Even though they have no free will, they are still brutal opponents, able to continue to attack with a severed limb or plugged full of lead. Sometimes when a ganado is defeated, a plaga parasite will erupt from their heads. The first type that partially emerges is the desganado. The desganado is your typical ganado, but the neck has been broken and the plaga will emerge from the wound in the neck. While incapable of using tools, the ganado affected by this will be stronger and rush towards its prey to try and strangle them. The second type is called plaga guadaña, meaning scythe in Spanish. They're able to erupt from the heads of ganados, leaving a mass of flesh, eyeballs, and tentacles. The most dangerous thing about this type is its large scythe-like appendage, which, if you're not careful, can decapitate you. The third type of plaga that can spring forth from a ganado's head is called a mandibula.
Gloria a las plagas! Gloria a las plagas!
They're hardier and resistant to damage than a guadaña, and have grown legs and a large mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, hence the name mandibula. They can also spit acid at their prey at a distance. Once this thing gets close, it is lights out. Since they tend to go for the head and face, they'll eat your head up whole. The plaga araña, meaning spider in Spanish, is the final form of Las Plagas and can be found on most of Los Illuminados' iconography. They're able to latch onto a ganado and send them into a berserker-like state, making them even stronger and faster. All of these plaga types are quite dangerous, as you could probably tell, so keep your distance. One trick that'll help to combat these plaga that emerge from the ganados is to throw a flash grenade. All three forms are very weak to bright lights, and a single flashbang can destroy these plaga in an instant. Brutes are humans that have been infected with a specimen of Las Plagas. They wear animal heads and wield either giant sledgehammers, rapid-fire crossbows, or some even use their bare hands. Of course, given their name, brutes are much tougher to kill and can dish out a lot of damage. It's recommended you deal with these after you kill the lesser ganados, so you won't be overwhelmed by them. When most people think of Resident Evil 4, they'll think of this guy.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Dr. Salvador, the Chainsaw Ganado, whatever you may call him. He's one of the most stressful parts of both renditions of the game, due to the fact he wields a chainsaw. Get up close to him, or his female counterparts, the Chainsaw Sisters, and you may just find yourself eviscerated. Of course, there are other variants of creatures that have been infected by Las Plagas that are not considered ganados. For example, wolves and dogs have also fallen victim to this plague. The colmillos, meaning fangs, is an example of this. It will attack you as a dog does, by biting and going for the neck. In some colmillo specimens, the plaga within has a chance to erupt from the poor animal's back and attack you itself, should its host not be sufficient. One of the first bosses you encounter in Resident Evil 4 is Del Lago, meaning from the lake in English. Del Lago was one of the earlier experiments by the Los Illuminados cult, and it was created by implanting a salamander with a plaga specimen. Said salamander would grow to immense size and eat whatever it could. Often, the cult would use this beast to dispose of corpses. The Garrador, in English the Clawer, were once humans that had gone through immense alterations via Las Plagas. These specimens were so aggressive that they attacked everything in sight. In response, the fine people over at Castle Salazar had sewn their eyes shut. They're equipped with extended razor-sharp metal claws that could rend flesh with ease. Due to their blindness, their other senses have become incredibly acute, particularly their sense of hearing. One little noise is enough to set them off, and they're able to locate and kill targets with a furious assault. Stealth is recommended when up against a Garrador. Sneaking up on it and stabbing the exposed plaga on its back is a surefire way to cause a lot of damage. High-powered weapons like rifles, shotguns, and magnums aimed at the back plaga are also effective, as the back plaga is one of the only weak spots on this thing due to the fact that it is mostly armored. Remember, this thing locates its victims via sound, but you can easily use this to your advantage. Be mindful of things that can produce noise to distract it, so you can sneak up on it or open fire on it. Next on this list of bioorganic weapons created from Las Plagas is El Gigante, meaning the giant in English. These are a human-based BOW. They are very hard to control due to their size and voracious hunger. Priests of Los Illuminados seem to be able to wake them from a long slumber. They're the definition of brawn over brains, and have very low intelligence. This doesn't make them any less dangerous. They can flatten you or eat you whole, should you find yourself a victim of one of these things. And like most beings created by Las Plagas, it's a good idea to keep your distance from this thing while you unload on it. However, just in case it grabs you, be sure to keep a knife on hand so you can free yourself from its grip. Should you survive long enough to inflict enough damage on this hulking behemoth, the Plaga within will come out of its back. This Plaga is a weak spot that you should exploit. Through an act of compassion, you can make this fight much easier on you. At some point during your adventure, you'll see a large dog. Once you save it from a bear trap, it will be grateful, and in the middle of this bout with El Gigante, the dog will distract the monster, making your bout with this beast much easier. Later on in your adventure in Spain, you'll encounter more of these things. Los Iluminados has taken the liberty of making them even harder to kill by armoring these things up, Urukai style. The only real way to kill this variant of El Gigante is to trust a new friend you made. A little bit of explosives and bullets wouldn't hurt your chances of survival either. Ramon Salazar's castle is full of many horrors. Perhaps one of the most unsettling within the castle is the armadura, meaning armor. The Salazar family has been around for a long time, so it's only natural for them to have various suits of armor around the castle to denote their knightly past. Early stage Plaga that have lost their hosts have found a new home within the suits of armor found within the darkest corridors of the Salazar castle. They remain inconspicuous suits of armor at first, but once they're active, you'll see them poke out of the neck area of the suit. Since you're fighting a walking suit of armor possessed by an eldritch parasite, shots on anything other than the Plaga won't do anything. These things have swords which will do a lot of damage should they hit you, but they also move very slowly. Ashley can assist you in certain cases against these things by tossing lanterns full of blue fire, which seems to stop them in their tracks. Once you shoot the Plaga enough, the helmet will come off and the Plaga, which is a Guadaña variant, will behave like a Plaga of its kind and flail wildly. During this stage, its assault is much more furious, but it's much more vulnerable. The same flash grenade trick will kill the Plaga within once exposed. The Novistadors, meaning the Unseen, are inhabitants of the castle, an island part of Valdalobos. They were created using a very disturbing experiment using Las Plagas, black goo, and a womb. I'll let you connect the dots from there. Now, the reason they're called the Unseen is that they're not only able to camouflage and blend in with their surroundings, but they're also able to turn invisible in certain circumstances, making them the perfect ambush predators. Not only are they capable of ripping you to shreds with their claws, but they're also very mobile opponents, capable of flight, and should they get a hold of you, they'll spray acid all over your face. Now, an evolution of the Novistador, designated U3, also known as the Verdugo, or Executioner, serves as Ramon Salazar's right hand. Wait, his right hand comes off? Anyway, the Verdugo is easily one of the coolest and most terrifying creatures in both iterations of Resident Evil 4. Its mouth is somewhat reminiscent of the Yautja species from the Predator franchise. An apt dot to connect, I feel, since this thing stalks you throughout the lower levels of the Salazar castle with efficiency. You'll hear it stalking you, and it will use its scorpion-like tail to attack you without showing its whole self first. As soon as you turn on the power, the elevator will take some time to make it to you, so for a while, you'll be trapped down there with the Executioner. Now, you'll have to be quite skilled in evading and deflecting attacks using everything you've learned in your adventure up to this point. The Verdugo is equipped with a very sharp tail, which it will gladly impale you with, steel-shredding claws, and is very agile. This thing was made to kill, so don't be afraid to pull out every dirty trick in the book to survive. There's a few liquid nitrogen showers located around where it attacks you. Using the right timing, you should be able to stop this thing dead in its tracks, allowing you to open fire on it. Now, you can either stall this thing until the elevator arrives to escape it, or if you want to prove how tough you are, you can kill it. But you'd better make sure you're stocked up on ammunition, make use of those liquid nitrogen showers, and keep your knife maintained. Last but not least is the Regenerador, meaning regenerator. The Regenerador is an experimental bioorganic weapon created by Los Iluminados. They're created when multiple Plagas are implanted within a living human subject. The Regeneradors are gray, mottled, bipedal beings with no hair or other distinguishing features other than a face. Their faces are almost all teeth. Their mouths take up a good chunk of their face, and their eyes, while glowing and still terrifying, seem small when compared to the teeth. Of course, their name is enough to clue you in on what they're capable of. As soon as you gut it, shoot off a limb, or even its head, the area will regrow flawlessly. These things also emit a strange, eerie breathing noise, which is indicative of their presence. They can also stretch their arms and either club you with them at a distance, or they can pull you close so that it can bite you in the neck, inflicting massive damage. When you engage in combat with one of these things, don't be afraid to reposition away from it so you can dump as much lead as you can into it. It may seem like no matter how much you shoot and stab it, it won't drop, but eventually it will die. Just wait for it to violently shake and its upper torso will explode. Another method exists to kill this thing, but you'll have to find a biosensor scope. Once you've found the biosensor scope, you can mount it onto a high-penetration firearm like a rifle. Once you look through the scope, you can see each Plaga specimen under this thing's flesh. It should take at least one well-aimed shot to dispose of the Plaga within, killing it quicker than other means. Some specimens of Regenerador are capable of mutating into something much, much worse: the Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden is a darker colored Regenerador with only a mouth and numerous spikes around it, which it can use to skewer its foe. The Iron Maiden is also found of grabbing and holding onto its prey, and extending its spikes into the recipient for the hug of death. As you can see, the specimens created by Las Plagas and Los Illuminados are numerous and deadly. However, should you have enough training, experience, grit, and have a little help from your allies, there's a small chance you could make it out of Valdolobos alive.
Such a fool, Mr. Kennedy, to have been bestowed with Lord Sattler's.
You talk too much.
Failed! You vulgar, utterly uncivilized!